Went through a brief introduction. You may know me as Amy Taylor and Company. We were around for a long time and then had a rebrand in 2016 when I got married. Anyways, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to identify the monthly maintenance tasks that you can perform on a regular basis to keep your year-end burden minimized as much as possible. We want to talk about how to automate some of those tasks to make you as efficient as possible, therefore needing less man hours, but yet still having a really good year-end experience because you've kept up with everything during the year. And then even further, above and beyond automation, but we're going to look at some of the solutions that actually do the automation. So not just the idea of automating it, but what are some solutions that we use here in our practice to help us automate those monthly tasks? So first of all, your biggest burden is really your bookkeeping, right? So you've got bookkeeping that needs to be done, and there still are a lot of smaller providers out there that just don't do bookkeeping on a routine basis. Maybe they have a bookkeeper compile it every few months. Maybe they don't do it until year end. And that is really where the biggest burden comes from. If you're not keeping this up all year, then you're stuck with doing 12 months worth all at the end of the year. You're not going to remember in February of 2020 what happened in February of 19 for the bookkeeping to be done and all the questions to be answered. So this is something you really want to consider doing on a monthly, even daily basis. So here we comment, and we call it daily, and maybe a better term is ongoing, but record all of your transactions in an account register for your checking account and your credit card accounts. So in a credit card register, I see people still do it both ways. Not using a register would mean that you record, here's my American Express bill, it's $10,000 this month, and I'm going to split the expenses, but it's still just one entry. Whereas a register actually records every single transaction that hits that American Express bill. So at the end of the year, when you're trying to see how much you spent on Amazon, and some of it was through, your credit card bill, now you've got a vendor called Amazon, even though it all ran through American Express, you can look at that vendor and all those transactions are recorded. Whereas when you just record it off of the monthly statement, it doesn't work that well. It doesn't give you nearly the detailed level information that you really need. So run a register for your checking, savings, all of your accounts, credit card accounts. Further, once you're doing that, then at month end, you need to go in and reconcile each of those accounts, right? So I know there are still people that they say, oh no, my accounts are all reconciled, but they've reconciled them on paper, but they haven't reconciled them in QuickBooks. I'm going to generally refer to QuickBooks because that's what's most commonly used. There are other solutions like Xero, FreshBooks, Sage, Old School Peachtree. But most people know QuickBooks, and so we'll just stick with that. It's easier to refer to. So you want to reconcile your checking account, even your credit card accounts in QuickBooks. You want to do it when that month-end statement comes in, tie it all out, tick it all off, say it's reconciled and finalized, and then remove any entries that were maybe duplicated or shouldn't happen, right? Let's say you're in your credit card register and you've got an expense there that actually was out of your checking account and you've got it in both places. Those are things you want to clean that up. If it didn't happen on your credit card register, it should not be a transaction in that credit card register. So you want to clean that up. You want to make sure you're recording your payroll on a routine basis, every pay period or every month, at least monthly, so that you've got good records to manage your company by. Now, what I mean by this is recording it in that detail format that you're required to report at year end. So in our last session, we talked about all of your direct costs have to be broken down by cost center or by discipline, if you will. So RN, LVN, PT, PTA, which is new, OT, OTA, which is new. You've got to break it down into that kind of detail level. It goes on through all the disciplines, including admin, marketing, if you're a hospice, volunteer coordination, bereavement, any of those, that's all going to be broken out. So typically, you run your payroll, $50,000 drafts your account because you're with, let's say you're with ADP and they draft it all at once. And that's just going to hit your register, right? That's going to hit your checking register. Well, you record it there, cool. But then you've got to go in and do like a journal entry, or maybe you import the data to report it in the amount of detail that it needs to be reported in. We'll get into that even more in a minute. Then you also want to take a little bit of time. You want to review your transactions. Maybe you review it by looking at the profit and loss statement to make sure everything looks like it's in the right accounts and it's all coded correctly on the general ledger. For instance, maybe you paid Amazon. Well, was that for medical supplies, or maybe a reference book, or maybe office supplies? Like, where should that expense be coded? You don't want to just lump everything together. So you want to take some time to review that on a monthly basis so you're not stuck with it all at year end. Another routine task that you want to be keeping up with is gathering your vendor information. So when it comes time to file your 1099s, you have what you need. If you recall from our last session, that 1099 due date is January 31st. That does not leave a lot of time. Even if your books are in good shape and they're fully reconciled and everything's accounted for correctly, tracking down your vendor information to produce those 1099s, that can take time. Vendors are not always cooperative, especially if you're not using that vendor anymore. So what you need on a vendor is you need that W-9 form that includes their name, how they're reporting to the IRS, those things. And we recommend best practice, you get that before you pay them. That's the only way to ensure you're going to get it, because they're going to want to get paid. Again, you're the one responsible for filing these, and you're the one that's penalized if you don't. And the IRS is really, really cracking down on those. So I suggest setting that as your best practice. We just get W-9 forms before you pay vendors. And, you know, I know small people are like, well, I don't want to do that from all my vendors. And, you know, they don't want to give it to me and whatever, and I don't want to make them mad. Here's the deal. And now granted, it's large companies, but large companies that follow a lot of best practices, that's what they require. I have a very large cost report client that every year I have to provide them a new W-9, even though it never changes. And even though I'm not even eligible to receive a 1099, so they are not required to give me one, but they have to get my W-9 to know that. They require me to give that form every year before they will pay me. So there are entities that do that. Don't feel bad for requiring that information. Back onto payroll. There's more to do with your payroll that needs to be maintained on an ongoing basis. You know, here I mentioned daily, but maybe the word ongoing is a better term to use of how often you need to be checking in on these tasks and making sure that they're happening. So payroll, you know, payroll labor cost is 70 at least %, 80 of your world, of your expenses, right? So that it's just where a lot of focus goes. So your payroll has to be broken down into all that detail. All right, well, so we're coming up into a new year, and let's say you've listened to our webinars and you've heeded our advice and said, I really got to get my payroll system dialed in so that it provides me good reports at year end by department. Pay codes are all squared away. I can get my salaries by department, my mileage by department, my taxes and benefits by department. But if you don't ensure that that data is being kept up to date throughout the year, what might happen at the end of the year is you've got new employees that were added, but they weren't assigned to a department. Well, now they're not going to be in any department. And therefore, all that time you spent setting up your system correctly, if it's not utilized and maintained correctly, then the year-end reports aren't going to be good. I know for a fact that ADP will allow you to onboard new employees and not just assign a department. And then at the end of the year, they just end up in no department. And so again, that makes your reports a lot less useful than they were as you designed them. So on a regular basis, you want to make sure that whether you're running the payroll or somebody else is running it for you, no employee is allowed to be added to the system without assigning a department. You want to make sure that your pay items are all assigned as well. And not only are the pay items and deduction items and departments set up right, but if you add anything new, it is assigned the proper GL coding. That's general ledger coding. That's going to tell the payroll system how to code it for the accounting purposes. And again, I use ADP as an example. They'll set it up however you tell them to, but they're not going to make sure that it stays clean and that when you set up new items, they have the proper coding. So again, you want to really, really stay fully engaged with that payroll system to make sure everything stays coded and properly set up and utilized so that your reports are meaningful. And by doing your payroll journal entries or imports every payroll or every month, you're going to see if something slipped by the payroll department. You're going to know right away, hey, Linda was added to payroll and she didn't have a payroll department. Let me go in and get that fixed. And so you can fix it. Maybe it's only one payroll that it happened and not, 18. So staying up with those on a routine basis, again, eliminates that burden at year end. Probably I would say number 1 year in burden is bookkeeping. Number 2 year in burden for your cost reporting is categorizing all your payroll, wages, taxes, benefits, mileage, and hours all into the proper accounts. That's probably your second largest burden. Lastly, on your routine tasks to be performed is billing. I know it sounds simple and some people are all over billing, and to say keep your billing current sounds ridiculous, but there are providers that it slips and maybe the biller has some other, maybe they're trying to track down old collections or whatever. You want to make sure that your current billing is staying current. Your billing department is on it. They're keeping those wheels moving. I mean, for nothing else, you need the cash flow, right? Especially with the new payment system coming in place. You don't want your billing getting behind. In addition, another piece of your billing system are the remittances. That is your accounts receivable ledger. It's your patient ledger. That's where you keep all the detail of who's been paid and who hasn't, whether it's insurance or Medicare. And so you want to make sure those remittances are being posted into the billing system. QuickBooks is not your detailed AR ledger. You do not want to keep all of that detail in your QuickBooks file. It is not designed to keep patient data. A, I'm not sure that it's HIPAA compliant. B, can it do the detail? Yes. Is it designed for it? No. Sorry, quick sip of water. It's not designed for it because there are limits, especially QuickBooks Online. You will hit limits of transactions, and with all that detail going through there, you're going to hit your limits way before you really outgrow the product. So those billing systems, you pay a lot of money for those. Use them to their fullest capability. Record your remittances in there, and then ensure that all your uncollectible balances are being written off in the billing system. So at year end, your billing system is all up to date. Everything's clean. You're not scrambling trying to clean it up and record a bunch of remittances that have been stacked up. So moving on, how can we automate these tasks, right? There are a number of ways to automate it. So I'm going to go through some ideas, and then I'm going to jump into what are some tools and technology that we use to make this stuff happen. So your monthly bookkeeping tasks can really be automated. Your transactions can be downloaded from the bank accounts. We'll get into more detail of that in the next slide, but you can actually connect QuickBooks to the bank so that that data flows freely, and then you're just reviewing it and accepting it into the books. When you do that, it's amazing how quick your reconciliation can be performed. It's mostly done for you right there in QuickBooks. You just got to review it and say, yeah, that's correct, and finalize it. Again, you maintain control because you're telling it, yes, I'm done, no, I'm not. Yes, this is right, no, I want to change it. But you're not entering data, okay? You're just reviewing it and accepting it. And you can change it and add if you need to, but you're not entering every single transaction. Rules can be created. So QuickBooks runs on a series of rules, and you can create rules in the system that tell the system, okay, when you see something coming through and the bank memo reference this account number, please code it here. The system will get really good at learning your names of your vendors and knowing where to code those, but you can go a step further and create rules. So for instance, my books, I transfer cash, I transfer rent to the bank account that manage, like I own my building, so I pay myself rent. That's one transfer, and I use Chase, and so the way, that's a transfer. But then I also transfer money to my personal account, right? And I also transfer money to my savings account. All of those are transfers. They don't have a vendor name. Well, in QuickBooks, I can give it a rule that says, okay, if you see money going out and it's got this in the memo, out of this account with these 4 digits in the memo, that's rent. That same typical transaction, but it's got these 4 digits in the memo, that's going to my savings account. That's a distribution. You can create these rules to automate it for you. It takes a little bit of setup. It takes a little bit of time, because as new transactions come through, you can learn new rules to create, but it gets to where you can actually make it where it enters it automatically and you don't even review it. I'm a little bit of a control freak. I want to review all of mine, make sure it's right. So I don't do an automatic entry that way. Moving on, you can do journal entries that are memorized. So you set up this template, and then every month, like payroll, you just change the numbers that are going into it, because it's the same entry every time, just the numbers change. And so you can set up a template for that if you're not importing the information directly. And then when you use a decent 1099 reporting system, it can alert you when information is missing from a particular vendor, therefore automating that process of digging through vendors, make sure you have everybody's tax ID number, make sure everybody's set up right, make sure everybody's payments are coded to the right account, and that thing, the 1099 wizard in QuickBooks can kind of walk you through that, and it'll highlight what's not necessarily set up properly or what information might be missing. So this is kind of repetitive because we just talked about a lot of this, but QuickBooks Online is my bookkeeping solution of choice. It's what most people use, QuickBooks, right? We moved from desktop to online for our monthly clients probably 3 years ago in a big effort to be completely cloud-based by 2020, which is in just a few months. We still have some year-end clients that are on QuickBooks Desktop, and we move them as they're ready to QuickBooks Online. We like QuickBooks Online. There are still a lot of CPAs out there that do not care for QuickBooks Online. They feel like it's not as well, they're just stuck in QuickBooks Desktop. I'll be honest, I just had to work in a desktop file a couple days ago, just pulling some info. I was a little bit lost because it's been that long since I've really used it very much. So QuickBooks Online is far more superior on its sync with your banks and the bank feed that works. You can still do bank feeds in QuickBooks Desktop. It's just not as slick. It's not as seamless. It's not as pretty. It's a lot clunkier in desktop. QuickBooks Online was so much better that we decided to move everybody. And like I said, that was 3 years ago. It's gotten even better since then. So every day, so you connect your bank account and QuickBooks and your credit card accounts. It walks you through that. It's very easy. You just need to have an online login to your bank. And then daily, it updates all those transactions and it puts them in a holding bucket for you to go in and review. And that's where it tells you, hey, I recognize this transaction. So it'll be all in green, and it keeps them kind of separated. It has one for all transactions. It has another bucket for just those that are recognized. And so you can go to that recognize, you can select all, and you can briefly review them and say, yep, that looks right, accept all. You can do that in bulk and get through a lot of data very quickly, especially if you've gotten behind. But then the ones it doesn't recognize, you can code it and say, because it'll show you what the bank says this transaction is, and then it lets you put in what vendor in QuickBooks does that relate to. And then it learns from there. In addition to set up those special rules if you have any rules that you want to create. So then you can create those rules that can be more specific. And, you know, if it's just a vendor like WellSky for your billing software, that's probably going to the exact same place every time. You don't have to go create a rule for that. QuickBooks is going to learn it and know it. Again, your reconciliations are like mostly done. You go into reconcile, anything that's flowed through the bank account, through the bank feeds electronically, it's already going to be marked off because it knows it cleared the bank. And so you just got to clean it up. There are a lot of times on my credit card, it's reconciled every time I go in, right? Month end, I put in the imbalance. It knows the cutoff date. You know, well, it doesn't know it. You put the cutoff date and it says, okay, I know what transactions cleared by that date, and it's reconciled. I just have to finalize it. So that's a big time saver there. I know on my personal books, you know, kind of like the cobbler's kids have no shoes. My personal books get kind of behind, and I'm a CPA, so I'm real particular, so they're in QuickBooks. I think I did like 6 months worth of credit card bank recs, and I put everything on a credit card. And I think it took me like 10 minutes to accept all the transactions, code the ones that it didn't know, which aren't very many. I spend the same money every, you know, same places, and reconcile it. So big time saver there. And then again, that 1099 wizard, that's going to walk you through who has missing information with regards to producing your 1099s at year end. Now, the trick here is you want to make sure as you add a vendor, you want to my practice is mark them as yes, vendor requires 1099 until you know that they don't. Obviously, Walmart, Home Depot, you're not going to issue 1099 to them, but any of your therapy companies, your billing company, maybe, you know, anybody that provides a service, you're going to be looking for. Electric company, no. But anybody you provide a service to, you're going to want to check that box until they provide a W-9 that says, look, we're not eligible for 1099 because we're a C Corp or an S Corp. Those are the only ones not eligible. I don't want to get into 1099 rules because that could be a 30-minute class on its own. Another one that we use is Bill.com, and this is an accounts payable platform. So it's a bill payment processing solution. It syncs beautifully to QuickBooks Online. It also syncs to QuickBooks Desktop. We've been using this for probably 6 or 7 years, processing payables for clients. All of our nursing home clients, we are their complete back office, and they have high volume of payables. So they send all their invoices in via email to a inbox to Bill.com. They got their own dedicated inbox. Invoices get sent there, and then we log in and we process those for them. And we, you know, so like if you were doing it yourself, you would email them into Bill.com inbox, you would log in and you would see them there and you would process them. The vendor, the due date, the amount. You can code it out separately, you know, separate line items. For instance, therapy bill. You've got PT services, PTA services, OT, maybe MSW, and those line items need to be separated out to the proper expense categories. You do all that coding, and then you save it, and then when you're ready to pay the bills, you go back later and you mark what you want to pay and say pay now. It's connected to your bank account. Then Bill.com on their end issues all of the checks or even e-payments to your vendors. They also supply a really nice remittance device. If they've got an email address on the vendor, they will email the vendor saying, hey, ABC Home Care just paid you for these invoices. You know, and it's either check is in the mail or e-payment will hit your bank account on this date. They do a great job. And they also serve as a document management solution for you because it saves all of your invoices, right? So you can get rid of that file cabinet for all of your payables. QuickBooks Online has a built-in bill pay feature that is a light version of Bill.com. I still highly recommend the full Bill.com version because I think home care, hospice, nursing home, assisted living, I think you guys are all big enough for the real version, not the QuickBooks version. Lastly is, as part of our tech stack, is artificial intelligence. So like I mentioned, we do the coding, the processing of the payables in Bill.com, but it still has been historically my team in there with their accounting degree, their CPA licenses, coding in those payables. That is a very tedious, time-consuming process of data entry. So we have begun to layer on a system that is artificial intelligence that will do that coding for us. So it reads, and it's not just OCR, which is optical character recognition, where it reads it. It's actually learning it. It's scanning the entire invoice. It's scanning the layout, the logos. And so it learns a vendor, and it learns very quickly. This is like Watson, that IBM Watson, right? And it learns how you're coding those and how to do it for you. And again, you still have control because you're still reviewing it, but you spend far less time reviewing that data than you do entering it. So that's what we're using. We're trying to free up our resources so that our highly skilled team can be more advisory and really put our expertise to work for you as opposed to data entry, right? So that's how we're using artificial intelligence. Still very, very new in the accounting space, and we're still working with it. Just started this year, but it's proving to be quite useful. One more, QuickBooks recording payroll transactions. I mentioned a memorized transaction. You can import your payroll into QuickBooks. It just depends on what that import looks like. What we have honestly found is it takes us just as long to enter our memorized journal entry, which is one transaction. Therefore, it only counts as one transaction in QuickBooks, and it doesn't start making your file too big to deal with. It takes us just as long to enter that once it's templated and memorized as it does to download the file from payroll and import it into QuickBooks. So we opt to use a memorized journal entry in QuickBooks. And again, it's a template. You set it up once, and then each time you just change the numbers. You want to be careful about what payroll data you're importing into your file. Again, there are limits, and you don't want that to get too big that it starts slowing down your file a lot. So for our final thoughts, again, we're just trying to take advantage of the automation that's out there to bring it to small businesses to help enhance your workflow, because in our industry, you've got to be efficient. Back office is not where your skills are best utilized, and we're trying to help you by providing those tools to you. We do full service, and those are the tools we know and that we use, but we can provide those services to you at a much lower cost than you hiring in full-time in-house. But even if you do have in-house, at least we're showing you what tools you can use so your in-house people can go further, do more, and be more efficient. If you have any questions on this or want any more information about the services we offer, there's our website and my email address. Feel free to email me at any time. I'm happy to share this PowerPoint with you, or PDF if you'd rather. And but I'm happy to schedule a consult with you. We do free 30-minute consultations that you can book online. And we just enjoy that you guys spent this time with us, and look forward to session number 3, which is going to be about outsourcing your back office and why we feel that is a best practice for our industry. Thanks again, and we hope to see you again soon.